Today I'm going to discuss a topic that is highly controversial. Time outs. Do you give them? Do you not give them? How do you give them so that they're appropriate? So if you're totally confused about this topic or whether to do these with your child, or maybe you're doing them already and you want to make sure that you're doing them the right way, then you're going to want to keep watching. My name is Nikki Morrow with To the Moon and Back Behavioral Consulting. And my job as a parent coach is to make your lives as parents easier in the day-to-day. So back to time outs versus time ins. What are they? What's the difference? That's what I'm going to cover today. I'm not going to go into the specifics because then this video would be crazy long, and I know that most people do not have time for that. So I come from a behavioral background, behavioral therapy background, so a lot of approaches may differ. I tried to be kind of more in the middle, run the middle line, I guess. Not too strict, not too permissive, I would say. So my viewpoint is that there is a very logical reason to implement both time ins and time outs. And before you just shut off this video and get angry and whatever else, I'd like you to hear me out. So time ins, I'm going to start with. Those are definitely the more attachment-based form of time out. Some people wouldn't even like those in the same sentence. But just so the layperson can understand, that is pretty much when I like to apply those when the child just cannot contain themselves. They're not purposely trying to break rules. They're not purposely trying to make bad choices. They are just kids and they can't contain themselves. They're too excited. They're too amped up. Maybe this is like the third thing that you've done in the day, so they're kind of at their wits' end and they're just not able to make those good choices. Or it's a completely novel situation for them and they just don't really know what the parameters are. And in those cases, you don't want to give a timeout. You don't want to give them a harsh consequence for something that they can't really control and something that you as a parent can utilize as a teachable moment and a connection for the two of you, right? You come with empathy, you come with understanding, you come with the heart of a teacher and with patience. So that's a time in, and that's when you would use a time in, is when your child isn't just purposely trying to break rules. They're just being a kid. And the last thing you want to do is reprimand them for being a kid. Give them a harsh consequence for being a kid. You want to teach them instead in those moments, and that is what a time in is perfect for. That is when you would take a little break from whatever the activity is and coach them. Take the time to coach them on why they're having to take a break, what the expectations are when they return to the activity, and you would set the parameters for what's going to happen if they make the same bad choice again. So that was it in a nutshell. There's definitely more specifics to it that I'll probably get to in a following video. But now we're going to talk about timeouts. Okay, from a behavioral therapy background, this is what I was trained on, is timeouts. But how do we make timeouts also a learning situation, an opportunity for learning and coaching and teaching? A lot of people, a lot of parents that I see, well-meaning parents that have, I don't know where they've gotten the information, but they think of timeouts as, go to your room and you need to stay in there until you know why I sent you there in the first place. And it becomes very punitive. It becomes very where the child feels like they did something wrong, like they're feeling very bad about themselves. A lot of times it leads to a breakdown in the parent-child bond. It turns into more the authoritarian style of parenting rather than the authoritative style of parenting. If you missed that video on the parenting styles, please go back and watch it because it's very enlightening. I highly recommend it. And so with timeouts, the way that I implement them is where it's definitely a teachable moment. It's, you go through the process, and of course I utilize them as the last resort. This is something where it's, multiple repeat offenses for something that's pretty darn serious, like a safety issue or, just one of your deal breaker type of scenarios. It's not something that should be threatened or utilized for every little thing. Because again, these are kids. These are kids. It's our job as a parent to coach them, not just to scold them and reprimand them and give them a punitive consequence. Okay, so timeouts are great for situations where your child is doing something for attention-seeking purposes, as well as, like I said, these multiple offenses where you've tried everything and it's just not working, and there needs to be kind of like a consequence, a pretty firm consequence. So what I do with timeouts is, again, I'm going to do it in a nutshell. This is a condensed version, but basically you would go through the warning steps, listing timeout as the consequence. And you would have, what I did is I had like a little cushion in the middle where there's no access to anything fun necessarily. They weren't necessarily ostracized to their room, or that was probably, that probably wasn't the right word, but you know what I'm saying, sent to their room. And basically it was a cushion in the middle of the room. My daughter was still in the room with me, and I very clearly would sit her there and I would tell her, you're in timeout because of XYZ. You need to sit here until the timer goes off. And yes, utilize a timer, because that way it's a fair cue, so you don't get distracted and leave them there for 10 minutes when you only meant to leave them there for 2 minutes. And your child also knows that when the timer goes off, that is their cue, that the time is up. And when you do hear the timer, you go to your child and you ask them, okay, why did we have to sit here today? What was the reason? And depending on your child's verbal ability or reasoning ability, you might have to help them out a lot more with this, or maybe put it in your words and just teach them and coach them. Mommy told you numerous times to not play with the electrical cord, and you chose to continue to do that. So I'm going to sit you here. We're going to discuss what we can do better next time, or in that scenario, if you're able to, of course, you would change the environment. But our children need to learn that those things are unsafe, right? They need to learn that there's a boundary there, and that there's going to be a consequence if they don't follow that boundary. It's really hard to do something related. We've spoken about consequences before and how they should be related to the offense. So if your child's touching the electrical wire, it's kind of hard to create a consequence that's relatable to that offense. So that's why I advocate and I'm okay with using timeouts in those situations, because it's there. You have that coaching time with them afterwards. Once things have calmed down, you are able to brainstorm with them and talk to them about why they had to sit there and why it was an unsafe situation and what they need to do better next time. So again, those are timeouts and time-ins in a nutshell. There's still a lot more details to put in there, but I hope that this kind of gives you a little bit more clarity on what those are, what the two of them are. And like I said, time-ins for children, especially young children, are much better and much more of a go-to type of consequence for your child if and when everything else, most of my strategies are preventative. So if all those other steps before then didn't work and you have to lay down a consequence, these are, time-ins are the best way to go. And then, like I said, there's certain situations for timeouts when those work, because from a behavioral standpoint, you don't want to be giving a ton of attention and sitting with your child and talking to your child for extended amounts of time If they're looking for that attention to begin with, then you're kind of reinforcing that need of attention. And of course, you know, a lot of the attachment-based people are going to be, you know, arguing, well, why does your child need that attention to begin with? Of course, there's some sort of void. And so that's where I go back to, you know, review my other videos on how to, you know, give attention and all the preventative steps for being able to fill your child's emotional needs so that they don't seek out your attention in a negative way. So I hope that that helps. I hope it gives you some clarity. And if you have any questions or want any more elaboration on anything, please feel free to leave me any comments below. And I hope that you like this. If you did, please like it and share it. And I will see you again next week. Take care. Have a fabulous weekend.